So let's jump into the odor and see what's so foul about this. What do you think is the meaning of the stench? What's the meaning of the smell? Zosima starts stinking. Is that what people expected to happen to Zosima? No. Did you think that would happen to Zosima?
Yes.
You did?
Because that's what happens when a body dies. It just naturally decays.
That's what
yes, there is some who get uncorrupted, but just because you decay normally doesn't mean you're corrupt.
Yeah. And then some people were thinking like, wait, this is decaying a little faster than normal. This must mean something more. And so regardless, here's what's interesting about the whole thing. They take there to be a sign of this stench. This means something. And the we'll call it the odor. The odor means something. And everyone is looking at Zosima stinking in the coffin saying, this means he was a great sinner. He was the worst of them all, right? And now there's something ironic in all this. Who would have been the first to have agreed with all that? Zosima, right? There's something really fascinating about this. That we take there to be this great mark of injustice that's being done to Zosima. And we'll talk about Alyosha's responses, because this is a really important part. But there's something about what becomes of Zosima, I think, is a way of actually verifying, I mean, it's kind of in the story, in the narrative of it, like a way of verifying that he actually, like, really did see himself as the lowest of the low, right? That he was, like, responsible for all sins. And it's kind of like you hear all these people hear Zosima say this, and it's as if they don't really think it. They don't really believe Zosima when he says things like this, which is why they expected him to smell like roses when he died, right? And I think what's happening here is you're getting the odor is a sign of what Zosima thought, right? And this is what's really, I think, fascinating about this. And it's as if what Zosima goes through is akin to, analogous to, exactly what happens in the context of, I mean, you know, kind of, you're getting a story in the world, which I think is kind of an allegory for kind of theological truths, right? So this sense of death, which is a very demeaning, lowly, we can even call it like an unjust death in a way. Like what comes of this? The meaning of this is the pronouncement is it turns out Zosima wasn't holy. It's kind of like they're like, oh look at that guy up there. He claimed to be this holy person, and now look at him. He's nothing. He's just a bleeding corpse. And here's Zosima, and it seems so unfitting, so unbecoming of someone who is so good. Why does this happen? Why is this the end of Zosima? Shouldn't it be the case that it gets completely verified and answered, and you really finally see the real meaning of this, and the lights go off for everyone, and they say, oh yes, now we finally see what Zosima means and is, and he performs all these miracles and all these sorts of things. It would be as if that would be like a faith which kind of lingers with the good when the good is the good according to our conception, the good according to our our design. But what happens when the good is willing to say, no, I'm going to go even lower than that. I'm going to bring this goodness to not just to the just, but it's going to go deeper. It's the experience of the unjust is also going to be the experience of the good, and it's as if it condescends to the point of being able to suffer injustice, somehow being central to the revelation or the manifestation or understanding. You can just put it as understanding of the good, and so I think this is what Zosima. Zosima's odor is supposed to be this indication that the good is seen in its condescension. And it condescends so low that from the outside you would think, hold up, it ceases to be good. Like once you realize, wait a second, power I thought was supposed to be manifested in, like, here comes the bad guy, and then the powerful God comes in and starts like whipping around the bad guy and smacking him in the face, and kicking him down and smashing his teeth in the curb, and like, yeah, goodness is overpowering evil, and it becomes this mark of like, that's how goodness is proven. It's in its power. And I think what's happening here is you see that ultimately goodness is revealed, manifested, in its complete and utter like willingness to go lower than anything else can like possibly go. And so I think that there's something about what's happening in Zosima is something that can really only be understood if you hit those lows of injustice. Like you don't fully, I think, understand the depth of the good until you kind of experience that. And so I think that's what the good, or that's what Zosima's death is supposed to manifest. Does that kind of make sense? So it's kind of a paradoxical thing that, in some sense, the way that I'm kind of reading it this time is the odor is in one sense, it is a sign. It's a sign that Zosima was, or at least it can be taken as a sign, that Zosima was right. That his life was what he said it was. Right? It's not as if Zosima said, I'm going to see myself as the lowest of the low, so that then I can be greater than everyone else, and then I can smell great when I die. Right? It goes to the end. It's an understanding of one's lowliness which goes completely to the end, and it's willing to let go of anything like a claim to itself, a claim to its own glory. Does that kind of make sense? So I think there's something about the fact that it had to be in the context of the unjust rebuke, the jeers. It had to get to that level in order to kind of prove itself, to prove the thesis true. Right? Does that kind of make sense? Questions, comments, thoughts about the odor, the meaning of the odor, and it's precisely that which is what torments Alyosha. It's not so much that it was just that Zosima died; it's that he died, and not merely that there were miracles. Right. This is the beginning of the second chapter of this. It's that Zosima dies, and there was injustice. So here, injustice towards Zosima. So here's what the narrator says. This is on page 339 of this translation. Second page of chapter 2. Like right in the middle there. Again, it was not miracles that he, Alyosha, needed, but only a higher justice, which, as he believed, had been violated. It was this that wounded his heart so cruelly and suddenly. And he goes on, skip down a couple of lines. But it was justice he thirsted for, not simply miracles. And now he who, according to his hope, was to have been exalted higher than anyone in the whole world. So Alyosha sees this person as worthy of being exalted higher than anyone else could ever be exalted in this world. This very man, instead of receiving the glory that was due him, was suddenly thrown down in disgrace, mocked. I don't know. Maybe Pharopon spit at him. I don't know. Why? Like, why? Who had decreed this? Who gave Zosima this unjust end? Who was it that brought this about for him? Who could have judged so? These were the questions that immediately tormented his inexperienced and virgin heart. He could not bear without insult, even without bitterness of heart, that this most righteous of righteous men should be given over to such derisive and spiteful jeering from a crowd so frivolous and so far beneath him. Right? It's as if, like, it's analogous to if you're walking along and you hear all these people making fun of the Eucharist or making fun of, the church and this and that, and you kind of feel like you need to say something, but if you say something, they're just going to start laughing at you, and it's like you can't do anything about this. You can't change the situation. You can't say, no, I'm going to triumph and smite all of you naysayers, and you're all going to see that I'm right and you're wrong, and you're going to bow down before the truth, and you can't force that. You just have to unjustly suffer the injustice of the situation, and it's like that sort of thing that Alyosha is experiencing, and it's basically like saying, that's not a good ending for Zosima. That's not how his life should culminate, which is why the very next page, along comes Rakitin, and Rakitin says, oh man, you're so distraught by this. You must be rebelling. And Alyosha sees himself really what he's wanting to experience and wanting to do. Right? That's really what he's wanting to do. He's wanting to rebel against God. And not so much against God, but against the order, like here's the context of goodness. Goodness is going to find its real expression in suffering of injustice. That's where goodness is really going to be proven and shown and manifested. Right? Not in having things work out well so that everyone comes to realize, yes, this is how things ought to be, but it's going to be in the context of like a suffering of injustice. And Alyosha is wanting to rebel against that, which is why he accepts the sausage. He doesn't want the taste of the sausage. He doesn't even like the idea of the sausage wraps right now. It's just the fact that it's like a rejection of God. He's wanting to do things. This is why I think he goes from it's like incremental. Summer sausage. That's sort of good. Vodka, Russian vodka. That's nice. And then finally, Grushenka. It's like that's the best rebellion you can have. And it's as if he's wanting to do something that's just going to be like a destructive act, an act of rebellion. It's kind of like when you tell your kids, if you have kids, if you go in to get kids, and you tell your kids something, and they don't want to listen to you, and they just throw something, they hit you, they scream, or they fall on the ground. It's like they're just wanting to do something to demonstrate that they don't agree with you. They don't go along with your plan, right? And so Alyosha is wanting to just demonstrate that he doesn't want this. He doesn't want to go along with this plan. And so he's trying to seek an alternative way. He wants to go by a different way, not the way that seems to be ordained by God. And so this is why he rebels. So Alyosha is in some ways just like all of our Karamazovs. He's a rebel, and that whole chapter begins with something in his mind. Yeah, this is on page 340 of the Peeber translation. This new something appeared and flashed in his mind, and consisted of a certain tormenting impression from his conversation with his brother Ivan the day before, which Alyosha now kept recalling. Right, so the conversation was the Grand Inquisitor, the rebellion chapter. That conversation that he had with Ivan, right? is coming up. He loved his God, goes on, he loved his God and believed in him steadfastly, though he suddenly murmured against him. Yet some vague but tormenting and evil impression from the recollection of the previous day's conversation with his brother Ivan now suddenly stirred again in his soul, demanding more and more to come to the surface. And then Rakitin on the next page says, "You're rebelling." Okay, and so he does rebel. He wants to depart from the path, and he does. He goes to Grushenka's because he's looking for something that's where he doesn't want to linger with the just. He wants to go to the unjust. He wants to go to the worst of the worst. He wants to go somewhere where he's going to lose his life. He's going to destroy himself. Right? Sometimes when things don't go well for you, you just look for destructive behaviors. Like if something doesn't go well, if you're in high school, and if you're a guy, typically you hit the wall. Like, why do you do that? It hurts your hand and it hurts put a hole in the wall. Like, why the hell do you do that? Because you're it's an act of just destruction. You don't like something, so you just want to destroy. And so this is just, I think, an indication that Alyosha is wanting just to destroy the good because he's despising it right now. Okay, he's despising it because of the fact that it's not just. It's not as things ought to be, right? Okay, so then he goes to Grushenka's because he thinks this is going to be the worst of the worst, right? Does that make sense? And what happens? This is a really significant moment in the story. You could liken this chapter to the analogous to Christ's descent into hell in a way, right? He's going here. I think the whole book is sort of it's like if you're not a Christian but someone wants you to read the Gospels, they would write a book called The Brothers Karamazov, and it's like a way of reading the Gospels in Russian context without it being the Gospels, but yet it brings the whole drama of the Gospels. I think that's what this book ultimately is. But it's within the context of the human life and the human psychological sort of situations that we find ourselves in the modern world. So he goes to Grushenka's, which is like the pit of despair. And what does he find there in Grushenka's?
That she's waiting for a letter.
She's waiting for this guy who offended her greatly when she was young, right? It says she was deceived. I get the impression that this person said they would marry her, took advantage of her, and then left, right? When she was 17 or something like that. And so then she was sort of left basically by herself. And anyway, she gets word that he's coming back finally, and she's kind of had this hope. Maybe he'll come back, but if he comes back, will I be able to forgive him for doing this? And she's tormented by this guy who did her a great injustice, right? So she's undergoing this great suffering about, can I love this person? Is there anyone that can love me? And there's this really great torment in Grushenka. Alyosha goes there. That's what she's undergoing. And Grushenka is excited to see Alyosha because for a long time she just wanted to destroy Alyosha's goodness, right? She was a person that got a lot of enjoyment out of tormenting people, right? Bringing people to the point, basically causing them to suffer. The descriptions of her is rather pretty humorous and intense. But she would like to lead people on, and then just let them suffer the fact that the more that they could want her, the more enjoyment she could take in the fact that she wouldn't give herself to them, right? And yet she kind of kept leading them on, and really kind of a wicked person in this action. So she's excited that Grushenka's coming. That Alyosha's coming, sits on his knees, kind of playing around with him, tormenting him, doesn't know that Zosima just died, and then eventually she finds out that Zosima dies. And what does she do? This is the moment. This is the great glory of the This is where the dawn occurs. What happens when Grushenka finds out that that Zosima dies? She jumps off his knee. Let me read. This is on 351 of this. The elder Zosima died, Grushenka exclaimed. Oh, Lord, I did not know. She crossed herself piously. Lord, but what am I doing now, sitting on his lap? She suddenly gave a start as if in fright, jumped off his knee at once, and sat down on the sofa. Alyosha gave her a long, surprised look, and something seemed to light up in his face, as if there's a new dawn in Alyosha. And then what Alyosha says is, don't taunt us, Rakitin. I may have rebelled against God, but I lost a treasure which you have never had, and I found a treasure here in a sister. And so he says, look, I found a treasure in a sister, Grushenka, which really then makes Grushenka like completely amazed that Alyosha thinks this highly of her. Okay, I have just enough time, I think, to get this drama out, because this is a really intense thing. 3 or 4 paragraphs right before where I read, Grushenka talks about herself. She says, this is why I hated you, Alyosha. This is why I despised you. Because, and then let me read this. Don't be angry, Rakitin, yada, yada. I'm a low woman. I'm a violent woman. Yet there are moments, Alyosha, when I look upon you as my conscience. I keep thinking how a man like him must despise a bad woman like me. I thought the same thing 2 days ago, and I was running home, as I was running home from the young ladies, Katerina's, yada yada. Will you believe, Alyosha? Really, I look at you sometimes and feel ashamed of myself. Okay, and so Grushenka hates Alyosha. Let's see how we can draw this. Grushenka hates Alyosha because, we'll just do stick figures. Because she thinks you must despise me for being we'll just say a sinner. Right. You must think so lowly of me. You must think that I'm such a wicked, despicable person because of the things that I do and the things that I think and yada yada yada. Which is like, she sees Alyosha in some ways as her conscience. So like her hating Alyosha is really a way of kind of her hating herself, in a sense. Which is why it says at a couple places in the book here that we often love the downfall of the righteous because it makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves. That we can be their judge now because we kind of see that we're verified or vindicated in their downfall, and they're not as good as us, sort of thing. Anyway, this context, Grushenka thinks Alyosha is judging her, condemning her, and prior to this moment, Alyosha was condemning her, right? Alyosha did think that she was this wicked person, which is why he fears her. He looks down on her. He wants to avoid her and all that sort of stuff. And it's now finally when Grushenka shows a little bit of compassion for Zosima's death, that he sees that the only person that has done any small degree of act of justice towards Zosima was this woman who I thought was the most wicked in the world. She's the only one that has treated Zosima justly. Does that sort of make sense? The most evil woman that I could imagine is the only one that has shown me a little bit of justice, or shown a little bit of justice towards Zosima. And so Alyosha completely sees Grushenka in a new light. She's not someone to fear. She's actually the only real sister that he has. And so he doesn't see her in this way, which is then now she's like, wait a second, there's someone in the world that doesn't judge me. There's someone in the world that doesn't condemn me. and actually has some degree of compassion for me. And so this is like the table's kind of turned now. And so then she no longer hates and despises Alyosha. So what happens in this context is you recognize that the way that Alyosha comes to understand the goodness, the justice of Zosima, if you will, is in the figure of Grushenka. And I think there's something significant about he came here to rebel and he found God, right? He came here to rebel and he found a new life. The last thing, and then I'll let you go. I know we're slightly over. But Zosima says, love all. And Alyosha, it's as if he loved Zosima, saying love all. He didn't love all. He just loved the idea of it in Zosima. He was attracted to it because Zosima did it. He wasn't attracted to it because of the real reality of loving all. And it's as if Zosima had to leave, which means he now lost anything good to love. And he had to go find something good to love. And where does he go? He goes to the lowest of the low, and he finds something good to love, completely without any sense of having this be something he could lord himself over, because he wants to completely destroy himself, and yet he still finds the good there. So I think there's this interesting aspect of having to go down and see yourselves in some sense as lower, so you don't condemn the other person, and they can actually then see the real compassion that you have for them, rather than like a pre-planned compassion, which is not going to be love. Okay, we'll keep going with this. If you have questions.